The weapon sandbox in Halo Infinite is extremely varied. You have weapons that are extremely powerful and just all around good, and then you have some weapons that, probably don't need to exist. Well, today in this video, we're going to be placing every single Halo Infinite multiplayer weapon on a tier list. So let's get started. Alright, so as you can see here, we have 6 tiers. We got S tier. These are going to be your best weapons in the game. Basically a weapon that you're always going to want to use anytime you can pick one up. Then you have your A weapon, very strong weapon, but not necessarily the all-around weapon. And then you have B, C, and D. We'll go through all of these. And then you have the bottom tier, which is going to be the dog water weapons. These are weapons that you literally just should not be using, and if you are using them, you are actively hurting your own gameplay and being a detriment to your entire team. So let's hop right in. So we'll start with a banger, and that is the Ravager. So as you guys know, the Ravager in Halo Infinite is absolutely trash, and it's really not even worth talking that much about. It has 2 fire modes, the burst fire where it shoots out the little balls of fire at people, and then the alt fire where you can charge it up, you can shoot it, and it'll put fire on the ground. In the flight, the Ravager was pretty cool. I liked it. It did more damage. However, the retail version of the game has the Ravager nerfed, and even though the alt fire is cool in theory, it really isn't all that effective, and with how useless the burst fire is on the Ravager will be our first weapon to make it into the dog water tier. Next up, we'll move on to the Bulldog. This is the UNSC shotgun in the game that replaced the old classic shotgun that we all loved and knew, and unlike shotguns in older Halo games, the Bulldog cannot one-shot kill. However, it does shoot a bit faster and has a bit more range depending on which shotgun from previous entries you're comparing it to. Normally, the Bulldog is going to be a 3-shot kill, but it can be a 2-shot kill if you're the luckiest man in the world, or obviously it can be a 1-shot and a melee. The Bulldog is very strong. Obviously, it's mostly a close-range weapon, but you can use it very effectively to pick up multi-kills, to clean up a bunch of low enemies, and to get you out of a bind if you get pushed by some enemies. I find the Bulldog very good. It is very useful, and we're going to be putting it in the A tier. Next up, we have the Battle Rifle. The Battle Rifle is Halo. Everything about the Battle Rifle is amazing. In Halo Infinite, it is hit scan, and while sometimes the netcode can let you down, it can be pretty easy in this game to get a perfect kill, which is a 4-shot kill. 3 bursts to the body or anywhere, and then 1 headshot to finish him off. The Battle Rifle is literally your all-around weapon. Other than direct power weapons that we'll talk about, you're basically always going to want to be using the Battle Rifle, and even though it's not the most powerful weapon in the game, because there are the power weapons that you'll use in certain scenarios, the all-around nature of the Battle Rifle makes it the best and most versatile gun in the game, plus it's iconic and it's the Battle Rifle. Therefore, we're going to be putting the Battle Rifle in the S tier. Next up, we have the Cinder Shot. Now, the Cinder Shot is kind of the banished version of the rocket launcher. It can bounce off the floor. You can also use the alt fire, which allows you to shoot it, and then if you hold the trigger, you can kind of steer where it goes a bit. I am not a big fan of the Cinder Shot. I don't use it a whole lot because it's not in ranked at all, but every time that I play quick play and the Cinder Shot is on the map instead of the rocket launcher, I get a little bit sad because it is a big downgrade from the rocket launcher, and although it's not the worst weapon in the world, I don't find it all that effective, and therefore we're going to be putting it in the C tier. Next up, we have the Assault Rifle of Halo Infinite. The Assault Rifle in Halo Infinite has pretty good range, and obviously it is very good at melting people up close. Unlike previous iterations of the Assault Rifle, it can also finish unshielded enemies to a decent degree due to the fact that it has a headshot multiplier on unshielded enemies. While you won't see a ton of the Assault Rifle being used in ranked just because it's outclassed a little bit by the BR, you will see plenty of Assault Rifle usage in a lot of the other social modes, including even in big team battle, and I think the Assault Rifle in this game is pretty dang strong. However, it's not going to be an S tier weapon or anything like that, and it is mostly still limited to close to maybe medium range to a certain degree, and therefore we're going to be putting it in the B tier. Next up, we have the Commando, which is another one of the UNSC precision weapons. Now, the Commando, unlike the Battle Rifle, is a fully automatic precision weapon, but it does have that additional headshot multiplier similar to the Battle Rifle, so you can finish off unshielded enemies pretty easily. However, the Commando does have pretty bad bloom when you're trying to full auto it, and therefore you have to tap it to a certain degree, and it can just be a little bit of a pain to aim with at times just due to the mechanics of the gun. Now, technically in a perfect world, the Commando does have a faster time to kill than the Battle Rifle, but in practice this rarely happens, and in most cases the Battle Rifle is usually just a better option than the Commando. Now, in rank specifically, the Commando can sort of be used as a longer range assault rifle where you can finish them off with a melee or maybe swap weapons once you've dropped their shield, so it does have its uses. However, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a top tier gun, and we're going to be putting the commando in the B tier. Next up, we have the disruptor. Now the disruptor can do two things. In maps with vehicles, the disruptor can be used to neutralize those vehicles with the electric effect, and then in maps without vehicles, you can use the disruptor pistol to shoot your enemy and melt their shield pretty quickly. Now I think the disruptor is pretty bad, and although you can melt shields with it pretty quickly, it really isn't all that useful, and you won't see people picking it up all that often. It also is pretty much purely a utility weapon, as it doesn't have much killing power on its own, and you're most likely going to want to switch weapons or melee someone to finish him off. Therefore, due to all of this, we're going to be putting the disruptor in the D tier. Next up, we have the energy sword. So this is one of those power weapons that we were talking about earlier, and the energy sword does exactly what you would imagine the energy sword to do. It is extremely strong close range, it even has nice lunge range, combined with the movement of Halo Infinite with your curb slides and your super slides, and just sprint in general. You can close the gap on enemies pretty quickly, and if you're playing ranked and they don't have a radar anyways, you can surprise your enemies and get on top of them, and you can use the energy sword very effectively to pick up multi-kills. The energy sword is very strong, and due to this, I am going to put it in the S tier. Next up, we have the gravity hammer. Now the gravity hammer is another one of Halo Infinite's melee weapons, although unlike the energy sword, it does not have lunge capability, and instead kind of has an area of effect that goes in front of the gravity hammer. Unlike previous iterations of the gravity hammer like Halo 3, you cannot use the gravity hammer to do any cool jumps or anything like that, but it does retain some gravity properties when you're hitting your enemies. I find the gravity hammer pretty useful, but it doesn't quite have the mobility and the multi-kill capability that the energy sword has, where you can bounce from enemy to enemy slashing at him, and therefore while the gravity hammer is definitely worth picking up and using as a close range weapon, I am going to have to knock it down a couple tiers from the energy sword and put it in the B tier. Next up, we have the heat wave, which is basically the forerunner version of the shotgun. Now in my opinion, the heat wave sort of replaces the scatter shot from Halo 4 and 5, as it retains some of that capability to kind of bounce off of floors, but obviously just like the bulldog earlier, the heat wave no longer has the ability to one-shot your enemy. You're most likely going to be talking 3 shots to kill a full shielded enemy, and you can do this in a variety of ways, whether you do it vertical or you do it horizontal, but the heat wave is definitely very strong, and the capability to bounce your bullets off of walls or off of corners allows you to make some cool plays with it, or maybe picking up a little bit extra damage as you hit an enemy and then maybe it bounces off a wall and then hits the enemy again. I personally prefer the bulldog over the heat wave, even though they kind of fulfill the same role, but the heat wave is definitely still very strong and very good, just a little bit less consistent in my opinion, and a little bit harder to use, especially if you're trying to use that vertical mode, as unlike the bulldog, it's not going to instantly hit people. The bullets do have to travel a little bit to get there. Now the upside to the heat wave is that it has a bit more range than the bulldog, and if you're able to lead your shots, you will be able to shoot people at a much further distance. So therefore, with the pros and cons versus the bulldog, the heat wave is still a very good alternative to the UNSC shotgun, and therefore it's also going to go in the A tier. Next up, we have the Hydra. The Hydra, like many guns in this game, has 2 different fire modes. One, a free fire mode that allows you to just shoot missiles wherever you want, and then also the lock-on mode, which allows you to either lock onto enemy Spartans or enemy vehicles. Now the Hydra can be pretty useful for taking out weaker vehicles in BTB, however it is not very effective at taking out just regular UNSC Spartans, and due to that fact, I don't find it all that useful, and therefore it is going to be going in the C tier. Next up, we have the Mangler. Oh, the Mangler. So currently, as of today when recording this video, the Mangler is unnerfed. Now the Mangler is basically the banished revolver, and it is very, very strong. Currently today, it is a 1 shot and then a beatdown, or 2 shots and then a headshot with the Mangler, or 2 shots and then you switch to something like the battle rifle or another precision weapon, and you clean them up that way. Due to the fact that the Mangler spawns on the map a ton, has a lot of ammo, allows you to 1-shot beatdown people with ease, and the capability to 2-shot them, switch to your battle rifle and finish them off. Also, the Mangler is extremely strong, and you'll hear many competitive players calling for nerfs of this weapon. While it isn't necessarily an all-around weapon, as it does fall off at the longer ranges, you will see the Mangler used a ton in competitive play currently, and even in social play, people are going to be utilizing the Mangler, as it is just extremely strong. I wouldn't feel right putting the Mangler anywhere other than S tier. Next up, we have the Needler of Halo Infinite. Now the Needler in Halo Infinite isn't too bad per se, although I really don't find a ton of uses for it other than maybe trying to kill an enemy that has overshield or maybe catch someone that isn't strafing too much. But that is kind of similar to the role of the Needler in past, where it is a lot harder to kill someone if they're kind of strafing back and forth, as they can dodge the bullets a little bit. However, catch someone that's off guard and they're not strafing, or maybe use it to try and super combine someone that has picked up the overshield, the Needler definitely has its uses, though I don't find it the most effective weapon in the game, and therefore we're going to be putting it in the C tier. Next up we have the Sidekick, which is the secondary weapon that you're going to spawn with in social, and this is Halo Infinite's pistol. Now the Sidekick is a 7-shot kill and it can shoot very fast. However, with the bloom in the game, you're most likely not going to be getting too many perfects unless you slow down your shots a lot. That said, the Sidekick is still very useful and can absolutely melt an enemy close range, and it definitely has its uses, although it falls off as they get further away, which is obviously the intended role of the gun. It can be very useful for cleaning up a one-shot at mid to close range, or just melting someone from full shields at a closer range. The Sidekick is a very good secondary weapon, which is the role it's trying to fill, and therefore we're going to be putting it in the B tier. Next up we have the Plasma Pistol, which has taken a huge nerf in Halo Infinite. Unlike in previous iterations of Halo, the Plasma Pistol no longer has the ability to EMP vehicles, as that kind of effect has been moved to the electric weapons of the game. Without that capability, the Plasma Pistol takes a huge step back in its effectiveness and kind of versatility in the game, and currently its only use is basically the charge shot to take out the shields of an enemy Spartan. Now don't get me wrong, it still does that to a decent degree, although the tracking is nothing like it was in say Halo 2, but you can definitely use the charge shot to knock off someone's shields and then finish them off with a battle rifle or another precision weapon. Similar to the Needler, it's also still very effective for taking the overshield off of someone, but due to the fact that it literally lost half of its versatility in this game, I am going to have to put it in the D tier. Next up we have the Pulse Carbine, and now the Pulse Carbine isn't totally useless, so we're not going to be putting it in the dog water tier, but it is a pretty weak weapon, and really its only use is kind of a semi-automatic plasma pistol, where you attempt to shoot a burst of the shots at someone and then switch to a precision weapon to try and finish them off. Doing this, it can have some effectiveness, but the projectiles on it are very slow and easy to dodge if the person you're fighting is actively looking at you and fighting you back. You can use it though at the start of fights to get a good upper hand, switch to your precision weapon and finish them off, but I just don't find the Pulse Carbine all that effective, and similar to some of the other weapons like the Disruptor, it really doesn't have any killing power on its own, and you're gonna have to combo it with another weapon if you want to get kills with it, and therefore we're going to be putting it in the D tier. Next up we have the rocket launcher. I mean, there's not a whole lot to say about rocket launchers in Halo. If you shoot it near someone with the splash damage, it's a one-shot kill, and really the only downside to the rocket is really long range when it's hard to predict where your enemy is going to be, or close range when you'll end up rocketing yourself if you try and shoot your enemy. The rockets are very strong, and they're another one of those power weapons that are heavily contested on the map, and therefore it's pretty much a no-brainer. The rocket launcher has to be an S tier weapon. Similar to the rocket launcher, we're going to jump over here to the sniper rifle, and for a lot of the same reasons, the sniper rifle is a power weapon on the map that is heavily contested, and even though it is a bit nerfed in Halo Infinite and a bit harder to use, a competent sniper rifle player can completely take over a game in Halo Infinite. Now unfortunately, not nearly as many maps in Halo Infinite have snipers as some of the previous games, and so you won't necessarily see as much sniper play, especially in competitive, but the sniper rifle is still very strong, and if you utilize the sniper rifle well, you can dominate a game. Being able to pick people off with one shot all the way across the map is definitely going to be something that can't be looked past. The sniper rifle is obviously another S tier weapon. Next up we have the Sentinel Beam. The Sentinel Beam is another forerunner gun, and it's been in many previous iterations of Halo. In Halo Infinite, it is definitely very good at melting shields and can also melt unshielded enemies pretty quickly. Now it is going to be mostly a close to medium range gun, as it basically just stops doing damage once they're outside of the effective range, and you do have to be able to track your enemy pretty well to use the Sentinel Beam, as you have to keep the crosshair on them the entire time. That said though, the Sentinel Beam can absolutely melt people, and it is pretty strong, though it doesn't have full versatility like something like the battle rifle, or even the close range effectiveness of something like the Heat Wave or the Bulldog. Therefore we're going to be putting the Sentinel Beam in the B tier. Next up we have the Shock Rifle, which is basically the electric version of the sniper rifle, although it is a little bit nerfed. So similar to the sniper rifle, it is a one-shot headshot kill. However, with the Shock Rifle, you do have to track them for a little bit, as you have to hold the whole kind of burst on them to be able to get the one-shot kill. Otherwise, it isn't going to kill them in one shot. Likewise, unlike the sniper rifle, which is 2 body shots to kill someone, someone, the shock rifle can take up to 3. And again, unlike the sniper rifle, which is a 1-shot beatdown, the shock rifle is actually going to be a 2-shot beatdown. So while it does have the effectiveness of being a 1-shot headshot if you are able to utilize it correctly, the downsides compared to the sniper rifle just make it a little bit weaker, and therefore we're going to be putting it in the A tier instead of the S tier like the sniper rifle. Though it still is going to be a contested weapon on the map, and you are going to see people pop off and make plays with the shock rifle. Next up is the Skewer, and this is Halo Infinite's sort of pseudo replacement for the Spartan laser, as it is basically your power weapon that is designed to kill vehicles. However, unlike the Spartan laser, which was a huge laser that shot across the sky, the Skewer shoots a huge skewer that has a slower projectile speed, and you actually have to lead it a little bit at the longer ranges. The Skewer is most effective at taking out weaker vehicles, though it can be used to take out Spartans, and you will see it spawn on some of the arena maps in place of the sniper rifle depending on the weapon spawns in that game. Now, while it is still very effective at killing vehicles, it does get a little bit hard to hit those vehicles as they're further away, but with some practice you can definitely get pretty good with the Skewer, and therefore we're going to be putting it in the B tier. Next up we have the Stalker Rifle, which is a very strong utility precision weapon that has a ton of range and a ton of damage output. So although it is a single fire weapon that shoots a little bit slower, the Stalker Rifle can be a 3-shot kill, which you can absolutely melt your opponents with from very long distances. Now the Stalker Rifle does kind of lose its effectiveness a little bit close range compared to something like the Battle Rifle, as it is going to be easier to use the Battle Rifle close range than it is to use the Stalker Rifle close range. But the Stalker Rifle is a weapon that you're going to want to be picking up, you're going to want to learn how to use, as it has a ton of utility and damage output that can really help out your team if you're using it effectively, especially in a power position like on balcony on streets. Therefore, the Stalker Rifle is going to be an A tier weapon. And this, guys, is the tier list. So we kind of had the battle rifle and the power weapons in the game, plus the Mangler, which is just very strong at the moment. And then we kind of have the shotguns and the shock rifle and the Stalker Rifle, which are all very strong weapons and have their utility, though they're just a little bit weaker. And same goes for things in the B tier until we get further down to the tier list. And then you just have the Ravager, which you shouldn't ever be picking up or using. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. You'll have to let me know in the comments below which weapon rankings you disagree with the most, as I'm curious to read those. And other than that, just make sure you follow me over on Twitch. I stream Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. You can also follow me over on Twitter and Instagram. And with that said, I'll see you all next time.